Greetings shippers, welcome back, and it's time for the monthly video vote. This month it also happens to coincide with something that has been requested for a long time on this channel. It's Thilbo, also known as Bagginshield, the pairing of Thorin Oakenshield and Bilbo Baggins. So let's get ready to dive into a realm of fantasy, dragons, men, swords, and of course, rings. Now, Thilbo as a ship is interesting and can be used to examine how important the visual medium proves to be to certain ships, even if the source material from which it is adapted is itself popular. The Hobbit, or There and Back Again, was written by famed fantasy novelist J.R.R. Tolkien and published in 1937. It is the prequel to the some would argue more well-known series The Lord of the Rings, and stood alone for some time as those books were published over a period of months spanning 1954 and 1955. Unlike The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit is aimed at a slightly younger audience, and also features a typical quest arc featuring an identifiable protagonist who views himself as quite ordinary until extraordinary circumstances reveal to him his full potential. While The Hobbit has been a literary mainstay for decades and has many fans, it was not exactly a fanfiction juggernaut, in part because of the status of fanfiction at the time it was published, which was nowhere near what it is today, as the exchange of zines and fics would explode decades later. If works were made, they tended to be private and only gained notoriety if the people sharing them were of note, as was the case even earlier in history with the Bronte sisters and their extensive RPF fics about the Duke of Wellington and his family. Another factor hindering the amount of Hobbit fanfiction out there was a combination of target demographic and a lack of enthusiasm for looking backwards in fandom. The Hobbit, as mentioned, was intended for younger readers, which can also be reflected in how it is written, and while parents who were fans may have passed the book on to their children to enjoy, generational fandom in terms of passion and fangirling, while it occurs, is a phenomenon that has recently been on the increase as the taboo nature as well as the ease of access surrounding this particular type of fan culture has shifted. Fandom has changed over time, as has the perception of nerd culture. There is now less of a stigma surrounding being unabashedly into material that was previously thought to be only enjoyable at a certain level of fervor, or was thought to be aimed at only those who were young. On top of that, nerd culture has undergone a shift in terms of cultural perception from lame to cool, and even for those who wouldn't go so far as to call nerddom trendy, it is no longer something one must keep hidden for fear of any large social reprisals, and one can always find communities to share one's passions with online, if support is lacking in real life. As for the second point, when it comes to retroactive fandom, oftentimes one's enthusiasm for a fandom does not stand the test of time, even if there is a desire to contribute something of one's own to the narrative. Meaning, for certain older fandoms, by the time it became easier to share one's works with the world, the time of peak popularity has passed. Such was the case with The Hobbit. Although the fandom was still dedicated, it was not overly so in the fangirl sense. Fangirl in this case referring to the activities associated with the term rather than the gender moniker attached to it. As with rare exceptions, fan works tend to peak alongside a work's popularity, unless something occurs to draw attention back to the world in a big way, as was the case in 2012 with the release of The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. Why did it take the release of this first film of 3 to reignite interest in this fandom when the Lord of the Rings trilogy had created such a burst of fiction for that world of which The Hobbit is part? Well, while the two are connected, the tones of the works feel very different in literary form. Indeed, in 1960, Tolkien had attempted to rewrite The Hobbit to have it match its sequel series tone, as he had years prior rewritten the riddle encounter between Bilbo and Gollum. However, it was quashed after 3 chapters, following feedback that it no longer felt like The Hobbit. Suffice it to say, whatever one thinks of how long the Hobbit film adaptations are, they do feel like they belong in the same universe as Lord of the Rings, and they also introduced or reintroduced these characters and their motivations in a brand new, much more shippable way. The first way? Appearance-wise, hobbits and dwarves do not have the most appealing physical descriptions in the novels, and often one does not imagine them as the most attractive of creatures. To top it off, in The Hobbit, descriptions of motivation and internal monologue are brief and often perfunctory, as the writing's focus is more on the quest and the world. Not to say it is not well or carefully crafted, or that the characters do not grow, but their growth can be inferred more through the quest than intricate character study. This style is indicative of children's writing at the time, a genre that has evolved and changed and has actually not been around for a very long time, relatively speaking in terms of literature. Something which changes when there are 3 films with which to follow the characters, as such an increase in length necessitates more complex protagonists, and the narrative as a result extends beyond the quest itself. Adding to this appearance is the actors who play these 2 characters. Both already had large fan followings, particularly Martin Freeman, who was coming from a stint in the intensely popular Sherlock show, in which he was heavily shipped, meaning that many of his fans were already primed for shipping, and indeed crossover Freeman ships abound, and have only increased since his addition to the Marvel Universe, as actor appeal can end up playing a large role in shipping. This, coupled with the extended characterizations necessary to facilitate the film adaptations, combined to create what was essentially a new ship. Indeed, it is speculated that no works existed for the pairing of Thilbo before these film adaptations, which may, on top of other factors to be discussed, be attributed to the aforementioned child-friendly writing style, which does not overly emphasize the characteristics of the side characters, even ones as important as Thorin. With all of that in mind, let's meet the players. Starting with Bilbo Baggins. Now, it must be noted that neither character is overly different from their book portrayal, but they are more layered, particularly Thorin, as what was in the text is built upon and supplemented with both Tolkien's other works and small touches to make the story more easy to invest in by creating characters the audience will care about over the length of this quest. Bilbo moves from being an ordinary everyman or every hobbit who would like an adventure, as well as a key narrator of events, to an extremely active participant. While he is at first unsure of his place in the grand scheme of things, he quickly acclimates to his new environment and is eager to prove himself to be more than what most perceive hobbits to be. He is loyal and eager to matter, and proves himself resourceful and adaptive, far beyond what one would expect of someone with his limited and sheltered experiences. He throws himself wholeheartedly into events and is intent on learning as much as he can, but is not afraid to pick a side and make his opinions known. Once he finds himself attached to the dwarves' cause, he is dedicated, but not unswayable, as he is not without guile, and his cleverness can be used for trickery, and his pull to the ring shows he is not without his own hint of darker ambition, even if it is nowhere near his dominant characteristic, although it can get him into trouble. On the whole, he is very identifiable, as he is meant to be, and a fine companion/avatar to project oneself onto for such a grand adventure. Next up, Thorin Oakenshield. While Bilbo may be the narrator and hence the protagonist, Thorin is ultimately the leader of the quest, a fact that is much more emphasized and expanded upon within the film adaptations. It is his honor that the group is attempting to reclaim for the good and reputation of all dwarves, particularly his group. Often pensive and prone to introspection, Thorin has prepared himself for the burdens of leadership and seeks to carry himself with a pride he does not always feel. Like Bilbo, he wishes to be worthy. However, his single-mindedness can sometimes make him rash and harsh to those in his charge. His temper can be vast and he is slow to forgive, but he is ultimately loyal and at his core kind. Ultimately, a shining example of dwarven strength, definitely fit to be king. So why ship these two? Well, in order to answer that, one must first examine these two's canonical relationship. Both of these characters, it could be argued, have the most significant arcs, and they often intertwine. The two start off slightly wary of one another, albeit for different reasons, and neither knows much about either's culture or personal motivations. However, as their journey continues, both reveal themselves to be brave, capable warriors and loyal friends. And they also share some core similarities, such as wanting to prove that they are more than the expectations placed upon them, especially as neither group has the best reputation amongst the other creatures. The extension of The Hobbit into 3 films means that one spends a fair bit of time with these characters, even more if one indulges in the director's cuts, and as a result, the relationship is heavily focused on, to the point wherein even the actors take note of it. And their chemistry lends itself well to those who ship, and the acceptance of fan culture made it easier for some, with Richard Armitage noting, "There wouldn't be a Thorin without a Bilbo." Truly a bold statement that not only encourages shippers, but highlights how closely the film weaves their two tales, and the importance placed upon their relationship. As these films had gaps between their releases, the ship was also given space to grow within the fandom, as some fans found it in between films, or were able to fill their anticipation with fics. This division also broke up certain key moments, such as the betrayal of the Arkenstone, another gap that allowed for much fiction. On top of that, the two have good chemistry. One can believe that they are friends. That, coupled with their journey together, led many to ship them. A ship that is still going strong, and thanks to the adventure-based source material, lends itself well to long multi-chapter fics that can keep shippers busy for quite a while. There is a good variety of fics as well. Fics at AUs to correct a rather tragic outcome for those who ship these two, modern AUs, fluff, and an intriguing large headcanon community featuring a female Bilbo Baggins. In short, there's a lot there for those who want to dive in, and its relative newness means that the fics are less scattered than those for the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, not because none now live who remember them, but because the domains that once held them expired or were purged. However, with all of that said, not everyone ships these two, so let us examine why not. Well, for some, the actions and affections displayed by these two do not extend beyond the realms of friendship or typical male camaraderie, particularly particularly in such a brothers-in-arms trope-heavy genre as fantasy. Others found themselves either burnt out or alienated by the length of the adaptation, which created a disconnect not conducive to shipping. Although it must be noted, one can often ship even through an intense dislike of the source material. As always, some did not see the chemistry, were drawn to other pairings, or could not get past Thorin's disappointment over the Arkenstone, even though their reconciliation is quite touching. As always, shipping is not for everyone, and while this universe has its shippers, many fans do not tend that way, and this particular subculture was greatly aided by the visual medium. So for those who don't enter into it or aren't particularly drawn to it, that may be another drawback. Some books are intensely shipped. However, visual mediums such as film and television have always tended to be more shipped. Are you guys Thilbo shippers? How did you feel about the length of the Hobbit adaptation? Do you have any other Hobbit or Lord of the Rings pairings? And of course, can you get through this video without either thinking of the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins or they're taking the hobbits to Isengard? Because I could not. And finally, after all of those questions, here's one more. Are you more of a book or a movie shipper? Let me know. I just realized when I hold my hands like this, you can see the multiple colors I got going on my nails right now. There's a lot happening. Thank you guys so much for watching. We have lots of exciting New Year's stuff coming up, so stay tuned and let's go to that outro. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to all my patrons, names on the sides. Follow me on social media to stay up to date, and as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.